Okay. That maybe was the problem. Unmute mic. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Mia Tits. I'm from Belgium, from the Soil Service in Belgium. And during the next 10-15 minutes, I would like to talk to you about maize monoculture in Flanders and the possibilities of breaking this monoculture with alternative crop rotation scenarios. In Flanders, we have two regions where most of the dairy cattle farms are situated. In the Flemish sandy region here, and in the sandy region of the Kempen here. And in these farms, maize is an important part of the feed ration of the cattle. And on these farms, most of the arable surface is taken up by maize, and often it is grown for several consecutive years, so in monoculture. For example, you see here in the graph the percentage of soil samples that we take in maize fields with different cropping histories, like monoculture in yellow, or maize alternation with grassland, or maize with other arable crops, or maize with grassland and arable crops. And for example, here in the Kempen, you see that more than 70% of the soil samples had a history of maize monoculture. In the Flemish sandy region, it was 45%. In the other regions, this percentage is much lower. Why do farmers do this, grow maize in monoculture? This is mainly because it offers a lot of economical and practical advantages for the farmer. And in the past, maize had always been a relatively self-sufficient crop. Could be grown in monoculture without serious problems, and even potential yield reductions due to monoculture could always be, at least partially, be compensated by increasing fertilization. But now in the recent years, we see that this cropping practice often leads to serious problems. So we have climate change and extreme weather conditions that are more and more common. For example, extreme drought or extreme amounts of precipitation. So in these conditions, a good soil quality becomes even more important. And we often see that maize grown in monoculture is less resilient to these extreme conditions than maize grown in a normal arable crop rotation or other crop rotation. Moreover, we have a huge problem in Flanders with nitrate leaching and water quality. So the legal fertilization limits or fertilization standards have decreased, especially here in Flanders in the red and orange zones of the country. And so now applying legally allowed amounts of nitrogen often are not sufficient anymore to compensate for yield losses due to monoculture. So here are some other adverse effects of maize monoculture. So we also see a decrease in soil biodiversity, in soil quality. We see increasing problems with weed control. Of course, there is for the farmer no economical risk spreading because he only grows one type of crop, more yield variability, etc. So now we have been studying the effects of maize monoculture on, and of other crop rotations on soil quality, on nitrogen balance in the soil, etc., on yields. And we have been studying this in two long-term crop rotation trials. One was set up in 2006 in a sandy loam soil, and the other one more recently in 2016 in a sandy soil. And the main goal of these long-term trials is to collect information in order to develop alternative crop rotation scenarios with maize, especially for dairy cattle farms. And also we use these trials and the data we collect from these trials to visualize the long-term effects of these crop rotations in order for the farmers in order to inspire them. So based on these trials, we developed and we calculated some alternative crop rotation scenarios with maize, especially for dairy farms. We developed 8 scenarios. The first 3 of them are monoculture scenarios with or without a grass cover during winter. Then we have 3 alternative scenarios, including 3 years of grass clover mixture, and then some other arable crops like cereals or potatoes or fodder beets. And finally, we have 2 arable crop rotations without a grass clover, but with cereals, fodder beets, and even with legumes. So for each of these scenarios, we made information sheets for the farmers, and we also developed an interactive web application that allows farmers to consult these scenarios, but also to play a little bit with the scenarios, to change them, so then they can take a look at the long-term effects of changing certain management practices on, for example, the organic carbon content of the soil. So these information sheets, this is what they look like. They consist of several parts. In the first part, the scenario is explained and illustrated, and we also have an economic balance calculation of the scenario for the farmer. In the second part, we show them in 2 graphs the long-term organic carbon evolution of the scenario, and for each scenario we compare this with the basic scenario of maize monoculture, and we do this separately for sandy loam and for sandy soils. Then in the third part, we make a calculation of the nitrogen mineralization during the growing season for the next 30 years, again separately for the sandy loam and the sandy soils. And in the last part, we make an estimation of the risk of nitrate leaching during winter for this scenario. We again compare it to the base scenario, and again separately for sandy loam and sandy soils. And we always make on each information sheet, we have some comments and some recommendations for the farmers regarding the crop management or the fertilization for the scenario. So if we take a further look at these different parts, the first part is the economic balance of the scenario. And there we calculated this balance at the farm level. This means that, for example, in the first scenario, which is the scenario with maize monoculture, we consider then that the farm consisted of 50% of the surface with maize monoculture and the other 50% with permanent grass clover. And then so we did this for the 8 scenarios. And if we first take a look at the dry matter yield for the different scenarios, we base this data on the results on the yields measured in the long-term field trial on the sandy loam soil. And then we considered that in a sandy soil, the yields would be 10% lower than in the sandy loam soil. And what we see here is that, for example, dry matter yield is optimal in scenario number 7, so the arable crop scenario. But the lowest dry matter yield was in scenario number 8, which was also another arable crop scenario. But of course, when we talk about cattle farms, we don't have to look only to the dry matter yield. We have to look at the production of nutritional value. So this is expressed as feed unit milk, FUM. So when we look at this nutritional production, we see a slightly different result. Again, scenario number 7 has the highest yield. But here, scenario number 1, with the maize monoculture on 50% of the surface, has the lowest nutritional production of the 8 scenarios. Next, we take a look at the cost price per hectare. And here we took into account cost prices, market prices of the different inputs used in the different scenarios and of the management practices in euros per hectare. And here we see that scenario number 4 has the lowest cost, and scenario number 2 has the highest cost. And when we combine both columns, the nutritional production and the cost price per hectare, we can calculate the cost price in euros per unit of production. And then we see that scenario number 8, with the wide arable crop rotation, is in fact the optimal scenario for the farmer with the lowest cost price per unit of production. So this is already interesting. And then in the second part of the information sheets, we take a look at the long-term evolution of organic carbon in the soil. Here you see some examples of different scenarios, and you can compare them, and each time each scenario is compared to the base scenario. Then in the third part, we use in fact a very simple soil nitrogen balance to oh, I forgot to say that this long-term organic carbon calculation is done with the ROTC model. It's a very widely used organic carbon model. And here for nitrogen, we use a very simple balance to calculate. We want to know two things for each scenario. We want to know how much mineral nitrogen for the crop will be available during the growing season. And we want to know what the risk of nitrate leaching would be during winter after the crop. So to do this, we have this very simple balance with an input side and an output side. At the input side, we have mineral fertilization and atmospheric deposition, but also mineralization from crop residues, from organic fertilizers, and from soil organic matter. And this mineralization is calculated with the ROTC simulations of organic matter in the soil, and taking into account the CN ratios of the different organic materials here. At the output side, we take a look at the crop uptake, main crops, cover crops, and then we consider that the risk of nitrate leaching is estimated by making the difference between the input side and the crop uptake. So it's a very simple model. And here, for example, you see the results for scenario 4 with the 3 years of grass clover, the long-term evolution of organic carbon. To calculate a nitrogen balance, we considered that nitrogen fertilization was based on, for each crop, based on the legal limits, and we would fill in these legal limits with cattle slurry and supplement it with mineral fertilizer. And then you see here the extra mineralization during the growing season calculated for example, in blue scenario 4. And each time you see here very clearly when we converse the grass clover, we see an enormous peak of extra nitrogen mineralization. The same goes for the risk of nitrate leaching during winter, which is evaluated from low, medium, high to very high, with the reddish colors in the background of the graph. And again, we see this peak each time the grass clover is converted. Another example is scenario 7, which was a wide arable crop rotation. And you see here the extra mineralization during growing season, thanks to the increased organic matter content in the soil. But we see also that here, because in this scenario, the soil remains covered during winter in most of the years, so also the risk of leaching is much lower and remains low. So conclusions. We made some alternative crop rotation scenarios with maize for the cattle farmers. We based this on long-term field trials and long-term simulations of organic carbon in the soil and of nitrogen. So we use these to inspire farmers to work on their soil quality, on their soil organic carbon, and they can see that they can even maintain or even improve profitability at farm level this way. But they should also take into account the extra nitrogen mineralization during the growing season. Maybe they can use less mineral fertilizer, but also during autumn and winter, because there is a risk of leaching. They can cover this by adapt their fertilization or change or adapt the crop rotation, and especially by using cover crops. thank you for this.
A very short question.
Okay.
Very, very sorry. Let me just repeat the question.
Yeah.
How many farmers are taking up?
That's difficult to say, but yeah, sorry. The question was how many farmers are participating in this project. This was in fact a demonstrative project, a demonstration project, together with some partners, and yeah, we had a lot of dissemination activities during the last 2 years. But as you know, it was COVID, so it was very difficult to present these results live to the farmers. So we had these online sessions. But there, rather a lot of farmers participated in these online sessions. But to put a number on that, a few hundreds, yeah. Just to give you an idea of the maize area in Flanders, maybe that's interesting too to know. We have silage maize. We have about 135 hectares, 135,000 hectares of silage maize in Flanders. And most of it, 70% or 45% of it in monoculture. So I don't know if this is enough as an answer. Okay.
So thank you very much. Then I will shortly take over as we tried to solve some of the problems here. This is still telling us something. I don't know. I simply need to go here and no, there was another USB. Here. Okay, this was. Okay, I will be presenting hopefully the next presentation. It was made by Thomas Isalo, and it's a work of a group within a project, within the diver farming project, where we are in for 24 partners from 8 countries across Europe, and the main issue is to test and demonstrate that diversification in agriculture can bring for all of us lots of benefits. So we have 14 field studies all across the European soil climatic, pedoclimatic regions. And we have, for example, in Spain, olives and saffron mixed up, and mandarins and field beans or winter wheat and veggies that has been applied in the Murcia region. And what we have been doing in Germany is within steep slopes, steep sloping vineyards, trying to get more diversification into these vineyards. We are in the Saar Valley, that's tributary to the Mosel area, to the Mosel Valley. Most of the vineyards there are on schist soils, very shallow, with high presence of rock fragments, more than 50% normally, and the steep slopes are more than 30% of steepness. So one of the things normally is done is that below the grape vines, the vegetation is pulled away, To avoid water competition, but also mainly to avoid the growth of grass, so diseases enter. It's done mechanically. This is more new, or some of the conventional ones apply glyphosate for a reduction of the vegetation. Especially in organic agriculture, you can see that the lanes between the grape vines are greened in well, everywhere, and in organic all are greened. So one of the solutions that we designed with our wine growers was to increase soil cover by planting aromatic herbs below the vine. With the purpose was to have something that controls the weeds, something that is more or less natural there. We have there in the soils natural oregano, like seen there on the left, and also to stabilize the soil. And well, we use them because they are native plants in the region, even if it's not the Mediterranean, but the soils are so dry and they're perennial, and they have probably a low water requirement, and they cover the ground. And that was one of the main purposes, to do something that can generate an additional income to the farmers. And this was why we used these kind of plants. So the investigation went really from the agronomic impact and the environmental impact to the socio-economic results of this farm. We had, during the 3 years, extremely hot and dry years for the region. So we had some difficulties in planting and extremely high temperatures. And what is normal also, some heavy rainfall events are demi. So you see here, you have the 90% in one event of erosion that was coming out from the vineyard. The establishment and growth of the herbs was not really easy due to the conditions, so we had to plant them by hand. Seeding was not possible, and we had to water them. So during a certain period. So you see, that's nice then for the farmers to work with a university. We had some students planting herbs. That was a research practical for us, for the students. So you can see, but nevertheless, you can see that they really managed to grow. So we started planting in 2018. This picture is from 2020, and you can see left how was freshly planted 2020. And this is only 2 years earlier, planted, a little bit watered during the first weeks, and then left it grow as it needs to grow, and harvested in between. So what we what you can see is that below the grapevines in the early springtime, you have quite a very good ground cover. And we have been looking on the results on the protection of the soil, and especially here how we can manage them. So our farmer developed a device for harvesting them below the grapevines, and tried to develop different devices, or bought something for drying them. Because what you want to get there is the etheric oils and not the water that's stored. So you can see he's an agronomic engineer, so he is permanently inventing something for the harvest. Okay. So the yield. We had also a comparison field, and you can see that, of course, the yield below the grapevines was lower, but at least with oregano and thyme, after 1 year of implementation, or 2 years, we had about 60% of the harvest that when we had the aromatics as a monocrop. This is not bad, especially because you have the real cash crop, the real crop that the wine grower wants to live on, still above. The point is that the wine was not really very much less, but especially the wine quality was not really bad. You can see that the 2020 year was in the wine quality a little bit lower because it rained in the wrong moment. So we had a very dry March, April, and May, and from the end of May until the harvest, it rained quite a lot. So the wine quality at the end was quite a lot lower. So this extremely high sugar content of the musts is for that region not very typical. So the acidity, one of the quality indicators, show that at least in a on the difficult conditions where the weather was too dry and the organic and the aromatics have grown enough, the quality was not really not differently or more bad than in the control point. So the acidity is, at least for the Riesling wine, a very a quality indicator. And so we can see that one of the side effects was that especially the attack of diseases was a little bit lower where we had the diversified grape wine rows, and the yield at the end was not really heavily affected by the grape wine, by the aromatic plants. Some other findings is that we have an improved aggregate stability, ground cover and soil erosion control, that we have low water competition between the grape wines and the herbs, because the grape wines take the water a little bit deeper than the herbs in the upper 10 centimeters, and the grape wines manage the water between 40 and 20 centimeters depth. We have, this is typical for these soils, extremely low greenhouse gas emissions that we have been monitoring also. No significant influence on the grape wine yield, and we have some improved ecosystem markers such as biodiversity and habitat quality, pest and disease control, and also an aesthetical land valorization. You have to think about this area. The Dutch people know it quite well because it's one of the target areas for the Dutch people to go on. The first step for the holidays is to go there, buy wine, and look at the landscape. It's the first hills you can see, more or less. We have land equivalent ratio. This is how much production do we get from the same surface, and we increase it with this because we have a somehow lower production of wine, very small, much lower, a very significantly lower production of aromatic herbs. But when we put them together, we have 150% more or less of production if we compare the surface only producing aromatic herbs or only producing wine. One of the things that our farmers said that they see some good marketing opportunities for the herbs as extracts for cosmetics. There's but also for perfumes, dietary supplements, food, and for plant fortification that they are using also for application. So thank you very much for the attention, and also only one very small question, please. Yeah.
Just a small question. How did you evaluate the wine quality?
he's asking how we evaluated the wine quality. We evaluated first the must quality. So, and this is by the Oechsler degrees, it's the amount of sugar in the must, and by the acidity. This is one the both quality criteria they apply at the beginning. Then we still did not test now the herbal wine. So we made our winemaker really made some small amounts of wine from each row to see if there is an influence on taste, and we are still waiting for tasting. So, okay, now it's now coming anyone. So we will try now to give Sofia Mazzi the opportunity to okay, oops. So how can I stop now my presentation? Hmm? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. She's okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, but now let's see if there's a. Can you continue talking, Sophia, until
Yes. Can you hear me? I don't know if you can see me. I cannot see my camera.
So.
Can you see the presentation?
Yes, we can, but not as a presentation by now. So we have to share this. Add video from below. So.
Should I stop sharing my screen?
No, because we can see you, and we can. It's by far not.
Would you like to share my presentation and I will stop sharing?
The problem is, I think you do not hear her very well. Where is the sound here? No, it's here. It's coming from here. Yeah. So, talk again, Sophia.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
I don't know where is the sound. So.
Is it better now?
A little bit better, yes.
Okay, I removed the headset.
Just start to talk, please.
Okay, should I start the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'll try changing one slide so we see if it's working. Okay. Yes, does it change? All right, shall I start?
Yes.
Yes, all right. So, hi, I am Sofia Mazzi. I am a PhD student in University of Cyprus, and I am today representing the Department of Biological Sciences team, Dr. Spiros Fendorakis' lab on ecology and biodiversity. And I will be sharing some of our lessons in establishment of time-based living mulch and its effects on crop drought stress under rain-fed conditions. So the Mediterranean region where we're working is one of the areas where agriculture is anticipated to be most negatively impacted by climate change, with average temperatures increasing and precipitation decreasing. Intensive agricultural practices such as systematic soil tillage, application of synthetic fertilizers and pesticides, extended monocrop systems are all eventually pressures causing land degradation in the Mediterranean landscape. In this study, we are aiming to study carob agroforestry systems with an established aromatic-based living mulch as a nature-based solution in the Mediterranean agroecosystems. Our hypothesis is whether, under rain-fed conditions, a time-based living mulch using Thimbra capitata can firstly become established assisted by soil beneficial microbes, including Arbuscula mycorrhiza and plant growth promoting bacteria, and natural water retaining minerals. In our case, we used Adabrigidi. Also, whether it can mediate soil temperature extremes and help improve soil moisture levels compared to conventional agricultural practices such as tillage. Whether it can reduce neighboring carob tree drought stress during the dry months of the year by improving plant water potential, and whether it can improve biodiversity for carabid and denebryonid beetle assemblages. We conducted a field experiment between July 2019 and October 2021 in two different sites, one in Scarino that we're seeing on the left and the other one in Vrisules that we're seeing on the right. The two sites had different climatic and edaphological conditions, with Scarino being in a less arid region rather than Vrisules. This is the Martone aridity index estimated for the 2 years of the duration of the experiment. We worked with 18 to 20-year-old carob trees. All of the trees were rain-fed throughout our experiment with no use of chemical pesticides and fertilizers. And in total, our design was based on a completely randomized design, and we had 4 different experimental treatments, totaling 43 trees. One treatment was tillage. The type of tillage we applied is more or less known as conservational tillage. It was done 1 plowing session per year with plant residues remaining inside the plot. Our mulching treatment contained chop and drop practices with addition of wild vegetation, chopped wild vegetation. At the first year, we applied up to 5 centimeters of thickness of mulching, and at the second year, we applied up to 15 centimeters. Our third treatment was wild. That was a no at all control of the wild vegetation. And our fourth one was our time-based living mulch, where at the southern sun-exposed area, an area of approximately 5 square meters, we planted young 2-month-old Thimbra capitata plants with the addition of beneficial microbes, mycorrhizal and Adabrigidi. Now, the first thing we observed was that thyme became better established as a living mulch in Scarino location compared to Vrisules, when it was assisted by soil beneficial microbes and the natural water retaining minerals, which we see in the photo here, amended during the planting of the aromatics. In total, we had a statistically significant time survival rate in Scarino, about 85%. And in Vrisules, we had only 66% of times surviving. We estimated that in Scarino we had about 52 grams per square meter of a dry thyme biomass during the second year, while in Vrisules it was 36. And during spring 2022, we also estimated the average living mulch cover by square meters. A big difference that we see here is that the Martone aridity index in Scarino conditions could be considered more beneficial, more favorable for the Scarinu site, where we had less arid conditions during the 2 years. Also in Vrisules, we had less favorable soil conditions with lower organic carbon and microbial mass. And also we had greater antagonism with natural vegetation growing on the site. A second result that we concluded was that the midsummer soil temperature was significantly higher in tillage plots. This was valid for both sites and for both years. As we see, the higher average soil temperatures recorded was in tillage plots, averaging at 66 degrees Celsius, and that was mid dry season during July, while the lowest average soil temperatures recorded were in the time-based living mulch plots and the wild. As we see here, this is an example of a tillage soil temperature recording, and we see temperatures as high as 73 degrees in the southern exposure. And interestingly enough, when we see the shaded area where the shade of the canopy of the tree is casted, temperatures 44 degrees, those are similar to temperatures we observe when we measure temperature on the thyme plants. Now, lowest average soil temperatures were recorded in thyme plots, and as we see here, within the thyme plots, we had a range of temperatures, with highest temperatures about 61 degrees in the distance between in bare soil in between the thyme plants, and temperature going lower as we get close to the canopy of the thyme plants and on top of the aromatics. A third result was studying the soil moisture during the beginning of the dry season, and we found that it was soil moisture is highest in the thyme and mulching plots. During the beginning of the dry season, recorded soil moisture is found to be significantly lower in wild, as well in wild compared to thyme plants, and also tillage also are significantly lower soil moisture compared to thyme plants. We see that we have consistently higher values of soil moisture in thyme plants. This is in year 1 and this is in year 2. But interestingly enough, we observe that soil moisture in mulching plots has increased during year 2, which could also associate to change in the treatment, making a thicker layer of mulching during the second year. As we see here on our treatment time during the 2 years maintains about similar soil moisture levels, and this is a drier year. The aridity index for the second year it can be classified as arid, and also we see an improvement of soil moisture for our mulching plots as referred to previously. Another thing we observe is that during the second drier year, we see a deterioration in the soil moisture levels for the tillage plots, and wild remains pretty much at the same levels. A fourth result is regarding the carob water potential. And here we monitored the water potential of carob trees at the end of the dry season. And what we see is that during the first year, tillage plots appear to have significantly lower water potential compared to our thyme and our wild plots. During both years, tillage treatment has the lowest recorded water potential among all other treatments. During both years, we observe that wild as well as thyme plots have the highest water potential values, while mulching seems to be deteriorating in terms of plant water potential during the second drier year. Overall, what we observe is that during all monitoring seasons and years, tillage plots appear to have the most drought stressed, appear to be more drought stressed compared to all other treatments. Now, regarding biodiversity, we monitored 2 families of beetles, of edaphic arthropods, and what we observed is that thyme plots produced increased abundances and species richness. Overall, thyme-based living mulch appears to have greater abundance and species richness for both families of beetles compared to other treatments. We are conducting a dense post-hoc analysis. It indicates that for the Garabide family, abundances of thyme are significantly higher compared to wild, while in the case of the Tenebrionidae, it can be considered marginally significant compared to wild plots. Now, regarding diversity indices, we also see differences, and we see that thyme plots for the Tenebrionid family, thyme plots appear to have higher Shannon and Simpson diversity values compared to tillage and wild. But in overall, mulching seems to be having the highest Simpson and Shannon indices compared to all other treatments. Regarding the Garabide family, thyme plots appear to have a greater Shannon diversity index calculations compared to all plots, and greater Shannon and Simpson diversity indices compared to the mulching and wild plots. Overall, thyme treatment seems to have a positive effect on the Garabide beetles, which are considered as bioindicators reflecting good microhabitat quality and moisture levels. Now, conclusively, when established under rain-fed conditions in the south-facing site of carob agroforestry systems, satisfactory thyme survival rates reaching up to 85% in Scarinus site can be achieved with the aid of amendments. In our case, we used the Arbusphila mycorrhiza and plant growth promoting bacteria and minerals. In one of the tested sites where more favorable soil and weather conditions prevailed. Thyme-based living mulch can be beneficial to the diversification of semi-arid carob agroecosystems and their stabilization to climate change. And this is indicated by two factors. Firstly, from the fact that in both years, carobs were less drought stressed in thyme systems compared to other treatments, tillage and mulching, and regarding the observed reduced soil temperature and evaporation, which eventually reflects a conservative water use observed in the thyme-based living mulch plots during the dry season, which can further improve soil moisture, reduce our main crop, our carob, drought stress, and eventually benefit edaphic arthropods. Conclusively, we consider the thyme-based living mulch that can be regarded as a sustainable nature-based solution for carob and similar crops compared to conservational tillage or dry mulching, assisting the systems with climate change adaptation and promoting biodiversity conservation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So thank you very much for your presentation. And for the patients waiting there, but well, thank you also for the audience. A very short question, because I think everybody here is hungry. Yeah, always, yes, I know.
Sorry, Sophia, I'm not sure if you explained it. I did not remember that you explained it, but why did you choose thyme and no another aromatic herb or any other herb that produce more biomass like oats or any leguminous?
That's a good question. Thimbra capitata is a species that is a species that is native to Cyprus. We also are conducting experiments with leguminous plants, Lathyrus in our case, and we're studying different influences in other experiments. So maybe we could chat at the later stage for these experiments. But in our case, Thimbra capitata is one of the hardiest species that naturally can be found growing in natural habitats in Cyprus. It is valued. It does have a very slow growth, especially when it's planted under dry conditions. But it has a good value for essential oil and for beekeeping in Cyprus.